Erwa walked into Château Noir, and the maitre d' smiled at her the way people smile at someone they've already been paid to humiliate, then led her past the candlelight, past the laughter, past every table that mattered, all the way to the back corner beside the kitchen door where the air smelled like grease and the music barely reached. She sat down, straightened her spine, and told herself she was fine. She was not fine because across the restaurant, Kwame had just walked in with another woman on his arm, a ring in his pocket, and a front-row seat to watch Erwa break from a safe distance. But the man in the dark suit who had been watching the whole thing from across the room had already made one phone call, and before Erwa's water glass was refilled, every table around her had been quietly purchased and cleared. And Park Seo-jin was already walking toward her. Subscribe right now if you're already on Erwa's side, because the man who just bought 7 tables to surround her is either the best thing that's ever happened to her or the most dangerous, and tonight, you need to find out which. Erwa walked into Château Noir, and the maitre d' smiled at her the way people smile at someone they've already been paid to humiliate. She did not know that yet. She knew only that the smile was wrong, too warm, too practiced, the specific warmth of a man performing a kindness he did not feel, and she filed this away the way she filed everything, quietly, in the back of her mind where she kept things she wasn't ready to look at directly. She followed him anyway, past the tables by the window where the city lights smeared gold against the glass, past the center of the room where a birthday party was mid-toast, champagne flutes catching the chandelier, past the bar, deeper, around the corner where the music thinned and the air changed quality, warmer, close, carrying something from the kitchen, until he stopped at a table pressed against the back wall, directly beside the service door, and said, "Here we are," with that same performance smile, and pulled the chair out. Erwa looked at the table. She looked at the service door 2 feet from her left shoulder. She looked at the distance between where she stood and where the rest of the restaurant was living its full, lit life. She sat down. Because what was the alternative? Cause a scene at the entrance while Kwame watched from wherever he was sitting? Give him that image to carry? She sat down, placed her clutch on the table, and picked up the menu with hands she willed to steadiness. She was fine. She was absolutely not fine. The service door swung open and a waiter shouldered through with a loaded tray, and the rush of kitchen air, hot oil, onion, something sharp and industrial, washed over her table and her menu and her carefully pressed dress. And Erwa closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, pressed her lips together, and breathed. Kwame had done this. She knew it with the certainty she knew her own heartbeat. He had called ahead, probably charmed whoever answered. He was excellent at that, at making people feel like doing him a favor was their own inspired idea, and he had requested this table, this specific location, this specific distance from the rest of the room, and he had put her name on it. Because tonight was the night. She had heard it through Temi, who heard it from Dara, who heard it directly. Kwame was proposing to Nenji tonight, at Château Noir, and he had arranged for Erwa to be in the building. Not at his table. Not anywhere close. Just present. Somewhere in the dark at the back. Where she could see without being seen. Where she could feel the full weight of 3 years of "I'm not ready" resolving itself into a diamond ring for someone else, and there would be no one to witness her face when it happened. She had debated not coming. She had stood in her apartment with her keys in her hand and her bag on her shoulder, and had the argument with herself for 20 minutes. The part that said dignity meant staying home against the part that said dignity meant showing up and refusing to disappear. The second part won. She was here. She was dressed. The red was deliberate. She was going to eat the most expensive thing on this menu, and she was not going to give Kwame Osei one single moment of the performance he had staged this entire evening to extract from her. She ordered sparkling water and the lamb and sat with her spine perfectly straight while the restaurant lived its life around her. Then the table to her left went quiet. She noticed it peripherally, a murmured exchange, an apology from a staff member, chairs being pushed back. The couple seated there looked mildly confused but compliant, guided away with the particular efficiency of people who have been offered something worth complying with. Their wine glasses were lifted. Their appetizers transferred to a tray. Within 3 minutes the table was cleared, cloth smoothed, candles snuffed. Erwa set her water glass down. The table to her right cleared next. Same quiet apology. Same efficient removal. The man eating alone there, jacket folded over the back of his chair, halfway through what looked like a very good steak, was redirected without drama. He left looking faintly bemused. Then the table in front of her. Then the one beside it. One by one, in a spreading radius around her corner seat, every table went dark. The rest of the restaurant continued undisturbed, the birthday party, the couples at the window, the suits at the bar, but around Erwa, a strange and deliberate quiet opened up, like a clearing in a forest, like space being made. She sat in the center of it and felt the hairs rise on her arms. Then Park Seo-jin sat down. He did not ask. He did not announce himself. He simply appeared at the table directly across from her, dark suit, collar open at the throat, a stillness about him that was not passivity, but something more deliberate, the stillness of a man who had learned that unnecessary movement was a form of weakness, and settled into the chair as if he had reserved it himself. Which, she would learn he had. She stared at him. He looked back. His eyes were very dark and very level, and they did not perform anything, not charm, not threat, not the specific performance of a man who knows he is being watched and wants to manage the impression. He just looked at her and waited, and the waiting itself was a kind of statement. Then he spoke. In Yoruba-inflected Korean, unhurried, the syllables carrying the particular music of someone who had grown up with both languages living in the same house. The table is an insult. The man who arranged it wanted you to feel it. I bought the tables around you so at least the insult has somewhere to breathe. Erwa looked at him for a long moment. You bought 6 tables, she said. 7. There was one behind you. Why? He tilted his head slightly. Because I could. Subscribe right now if you already feel what is happening in this room, because this is where Erwa's story stops being about humiliation and becomes something that Kwame, wherever he is sitting with his ring and his plan, is not going to be able to control. Stay here. You need to see this. She should have left. Every reasonable part of her, the part that had survived Kwame, rebuilt herself with clean hands and careful choices, learned to recognize the specific gravity of men who operated outside ordinary rules, told her to finish her water, take the lamb to go, get in a cab and go home and run a bath and let this evening be over. This man was a stranger. He had bought 7 restaurant tables to clear space around a woman he had never met. That was not a normal gesture. That was not the behavior of someone she should be sharing air with, let alone a meal. She stayed. Partly because across the restaurant, Kwame had just walked in. She did not see him, she was not looking in that direction, and she had promised herself she would not, but she felt it, the way you feel a change in air pressure, the way a room shifts when someone enters who has claimed too much of your interior life. She heard his laugh. That specific laugh, the one that used to make her feel chosen, and now made something raw and specific move through her chest. And she felt Seo-jin's eyes move, briefly, once, in that direction, and come back to her face. You don't have to pretend that's not happening, he said quietly. I'm not pretending, she said. I'm choosing. Something moved in his expression. Subtle. Just enough. Choosing is harder, he said. I know, she said. She picked up her menu. Sit. But you're paying for your own dinner. I bought 7 tables tonight, he said. I think I can cover a meal. That's not the point. No, he agreed. It's not. She looked at him over the top of the menu. How did you know it was deliberate? The table. You said you knew when I walked in. The host checked your name against his personal phone before he moved, Seo-jin said. Not the reservation system. Someone had contacted him directly. The way he smiled when he confirmed your table was the smile of a man who has been paid to enjoy a moment that isn't his. A pause. I've used that smile before. I recognized it. Erwa lowered the menu slowly. Who are you, she said. And, don't give me a name. I have your name. Who are you? He looked at her steadily. Someone who operates in spaces where names are the least important thing about a person. That's not an answer. No, he said. It's not. They ate. Not together exactly, parallel. Two people sharing space with a charged and careful distance between them, but they talked, and somewhere in the conversation the distance became something else, something less like caution and more like attention. She told him about the building she was designing on the island, 20 floors, residential, the kind of project that would either make her career or bury it. He listened without the performance of listening, without the nodding and the strategic eye contact and the right noises inserted at the right intervals. He just listened, and when she finished he asked one question, and the question was so exactly the right one that she stopped and looked at him. "How did you know to ask that?" she said. "Because it's what matters," he said simply. She studied him. "Tell me something true. Anything." He considered this, seriously. The way she was already learning, he considered everything, not performance, but actual thought. Then, "My mother used to say the worst thing one person can do to another is make them invisible in a room full of people. She said it was worse than a raised hand. Because at least a raised hand acknowledges you exist." Erwa's throat tightened. She pressed her lips together. "Your mother sounds like she knew things," she said. "She knew everything," he said. "She died knowing more than everyone in the room, as usual." From across the restaurant came the sound of a cork, a small cheer, and Kwame's laugh again, closer now, carrying. Erwa did not turn. Seo-jin's eyes moved once in that direction and came back. Then something happened that she did not expect. The cheer died. Not faded, died. Cut short. She heard the chair scrape, heard Nenji's voice at a register that was not celebration, heard Kwame say something low and urgent, and then a silence that had a different quality from all the silence that had come before it. She did not turn around. She would not turn around. But she watched Seo-jin's face, and his face told her something had gone wrong at that table, and whatever it was, it had not been part of Kwame's plan. She looked down at her lamb. It was extraordinary. She ate every bite. Comment below right now, did Nenji just say no? Drop your prediction and subscribe if you need to know what happened at that table, because we are getting there, and it is going to change everything. She did not find out that night what had happened at Kwame's table. She found out 4 days later, through Bizi, who had heard it from someone who had been 3 tables away. Nenji had said yes. The proposal had happened. The ring was on. But something in the room had shifted mid-dinner, Kwame distracted, looking toward the back of the restaurant at something no longer there. His attention pulled sideways from the most important moment of his stated life, by the ghost of a woman he had seated in the corner to punish. The yes had happened, but it had a shadow on it, a fissure running through it that the champagne could not fill, and the table had felt it even if no one said so directly. Erwa received this information standing in her side office with a hard hat under one arm and her phone pressed to her ear, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Good." Bizi said, "Erwa." "Not good that she said yes," Erwa said. "Good that he couldn't be present for it. Good that even in the moment he arranged to win, he couldn't stop looking for me." She put the phone down and went back to her blueprints. She had floors to build. What she did not know, what she was still 4 days from understanding, was that Park Seo-jin had also been watching the proposal table. That he had counted. That Kwame had glanced toward the back of the restaurant, toward the empty space where Erwa's corner table had been cleared into its strange quiet island, 17 times during the course of that dinner. That Seo-jin had noted each one with the attention of a man who needed to understand what kind of problem he was looking at before it became a different kind of problem entirely. He had left the restaurant that night after Erwa, stood on the pavement in the thick Lagos evening, and thought about a woman who chose silence over performance and asked for something true in a place designed to make her feel small. He had thought, this is going to cost me something. He had gotten into the car anyway. A card arrived at her office on a Wednesday. Cream-colored, heavy stuck. 4 words in very clean, very economical handwriting. The question you didn't ask. Below it, a restaurant address and a time. Her assistant held it out to her with slightly raised eyebrows. "No sender name," she said. Courier dropped it. Erwa stood in the middle of her office floor holding the card. She thought about dark eyes and precise questions and 7 cleared tables. She thought about the question she hadn't asked, which was not who are you and not why did you do it, but something underneath both of those, something she hadn't been ready to give language to in the middle of Château Noir with Kwame's laugh in the air. She went. He was already seated, and the table this time was the best in the room. He stood when she arrived. She noted this, not because it was old-fashioned, but because it was intentional, and everything about this man was intentional, and she had decided she was going to pay attention to all of it. "The question I didn't ask," she said, "before Saturday, I'm asking it now." "Sit first," he said. She sat. He poured water from the carafe, slid the glass toward her, and said, "What do you want from coming here tonight?" "That's not the question I didn't ask. That's a deflection." "It's both," he said. She leaned back and looked at him. "I want to understand who you are. Not what you do. Not what you control. Who you are." He was quiet longer this time. "That," he said, "is going to take more than one dinner." "Then we'd better order." For the first time since she had met him, he smiled. Not almost fully. It rewrote his face. It made him look like someone who had once been very young and still remembered what it felt like, and she felt something in her chest move, something that had been locked and still for 18 months, and she reached for her water glass and took a long, slow sip and thought, "This is going to cost me something too." They stayed 4 hours. He told her about his mother. Not the controlled version, the full one. Yoruba woman, Lagos-born, who had married a Korean man in 1989 when that still made airport security look twice, who had built a life between two cultures and made her son fluent in the grammar of both without ever quite belonging to either, who had died of something fast and undignified when he was 24 and left him with a grief he had converted, the way he converted most things, into competence. He told her he had been moving since then, city to city, contract to contract, the specific motion of a man who has not yet decided what stillness would mean for him. Erwa listened without performing it. When he finished, she said, "What would it take for you to stop?" He looked at her across the remains of the meal with the city noise rising outside and said, "I'm beginning to think it would take something very specific." She did not ask him to name it. She already knew. She could feel its shape in the room between them. But the room was about to change. Because 3 days after that dinner, while Erwa was leaving her side office at 7:30, blueprints rolled under one arm, hard hat in hand, the particular exhausted satisfaction of a long day on a real project, she noticed the car. Parked across the street. Engine running. Lagos plates. Angle and distance identical to the one she had noticed on Monday. She stood on the pavement and looked at it for 3 seconds. Then she walked to her car, got in, and drove home. She called her sister Folake. "Someone is watching me," she said. Folake, who processed everything through evidence, said, "Same car twice. Same car, same position, same engine running." Kwame. It wasn't a question. Erwa didn't answer it like one. "Maybe," she said. "Erwa. If he's..." "I know. Then you need to." "I said I know, Folake." She put the phone down. She stood at her window in the blue evening and thought about who she could call. Then her phone buzzed. A message from a number saved under a single initial, S. *, there has been a car outside your side office. I am handling it. I should have told you I was watching for it before now. I'm sorry I didn't, *. She read it twice. Her chest did several things in quick succession. She typed, "How long have you known?" His reply came in under a minute, * long enough that I owe you an explanation. Are you safe right now, *? She looked around her apartment, hers, entirely hers, the architecture books she had built the shelf to hold, the small cactus she had somehow kept alive, and typed, * yes. We need to talk. Tonight, *. I'll come to you, he sent back. Give me an hour. She put the phone on the counter and stood very still in the middle of her kitchen. She was not angry yet. The anger was assembled and ready, but underneath it was something more unsettling and more honest, the knowledge that a man she had known for less than 3 weeks had been quietly watching her back without her permission, and that she felt safer knowing it than she felt disturbed by it, and that both of these things being simultaneously true was something she needed to examine very carefully and probably not tonight. He arrived in 50 minutes. She opened the door before he knocked. "Talk," she said. He talked. His name was Deli, Kwame's associate, soft-handed, the kind of man who ran errands for people with money and considered himself discreet because he had never yet been caught. Seo-jin had identified him within days of their second dinner. Deli had been hired to document Erwa's movements, her routes, her hours, who she met with, and specifically, whether the man she had been seen leaving Château Noir with was who certain people suspected him to be. He knows who you are, Erwa said. Yes. How? Kwame moves in circles close enough to certain business interests. A Korean man, import-export, Lagos contacts. If he heard a description, he had enough to find a name. He knows exactly who I am. She looked at him. And you didn't tell me? No. You made decisions about my safety without consulting me. Yes. Seo-jin. I know, he said. His voice was even but not defensive, not the defensive evenness of a man managing the conversation. Just honest. I handled it the way I handle things, and the way I handle things assumes an authority I did not have with you. I'm telling you now because I would rather have this conversation than have you find out from someone else. What did you do to Deli? Nothing permanent. He was convinced, through channels that don't require detail, that this particular contract was no longer worth his time. Convinced how? He looked at her steadily. Would you like the specific answer to that question? She thought about it. No, she said. But I want to know everything from here forward. Before. Not after. Agreed. I mean it. I know you mean it, he said. That's why I'm here instead of sending a message. She looked at him standing in her living room, jacket off, the controlled surface slightly down, the weariness of whatever the day had cost him visible in the set of his shoulders, and she felt the anger recalibrate into something more complicated. Sit down, she said. I'll make tea. He sat. She stood at her kitchen counter with the kettle running and her back to him and breathed for a moment. Then she said, without turning, There's more. I can feel there's more. Yes, he said. Tell me. A pause. Then, I came to Lagos 11 days before I met you. I came because of a port contract, one that Kwame's family has held for 11 years, coming up for renegotiation. I was asked to facilitate its acquisition by a competing interest. That is the actual nature of my business here. The kettle came to boil. She did not move for a moment. So, she said carefully, still not turning. Kwame seated me at the worst table in the restaurant. In doing so, he introduced me to the man who is here to end his family's 11-year contract. Yes. His pettiness built the door, she said. And you walked through it. Erwa. I'm not upset, she said. And she meant it exactly. She was something, standing in her kitchen at this hour with this information arranging itself into a shape so geometrically precise it felt almost designed, but it was not upset. His cruelty created his own consequence. That's not your fault. That's not even irony. That's just what happens when a small man makes a large mistake. She turned around. She looked at him across her kitchen. When is the meeting, she said. 10 days. And after. Seoul. To complete the transfer. She carried 2 cups of tea to the table and set one in front of him and sat down. And after Seoul, she said. He looked at her. The question sat between them in the quiet apartment, in the kitchen light, in the particular weight of everything the last 3 weeks had built. I haven't decided, he said. And then, quieter, I hadn't expected to have a reason to decide. She wrapped her hands around her cup. Then start deciding, she said. Subscribe right now because the contract meeting is in 10 days and what happens in that room is going to bring Kwame directly to Erwa's door, and when he comes, Seo-jin is not going to be there to intercept it. Like this video if you need to see how Erwa handles him alone, because that scene is coming and it is the one this whole story has been building toward. The contract meeting happened on a Thursday, glass tower on Victoria Island, a room full of men who had learned to smile without warmth. Seo-jin sat across from Kwame's uncle, a man with a heavy ring on his right hand and 30 years of Lagos boardroom practice, and the meeting lasted 3 hours and produced a transfer of interest so complete and so clean that 11 years of the Osei family's port revenue redirected itself like water finding a new bed, quietly, entirely, without drama. Seo-jin drove back across the bridge in the early evening light and called Erwa. It's done, he said. She said, Are you okay? He paused. People did not ask him this. Yes, he said. Then, can I come over? She said yes. He stood in her apartment with the city behind him and the controlled surface further down than she had ever seen it, The day's work visible in the set of his jaw, in the slight dimming of that particular precision, and she crossed the room and stood in front of him, and he looked at her with eyes that were very tired and very honest, and she said, "I know what you're going to say." "Do you?" "You're going to say that soul is the next step, that the work doesn't stop, that this," she gestured between them, "is not a simple thing." "All of that is true," he said. "I know, Erwa. I'm not asking you to stay," she said. "Clearly. Without performance. I'm asking you to come back. Those are different things, and you know they are." He was very still. "I've been running," he said, "since I was 24 years old. I know. I don't know how to stop." "You stopped to buy 7 tables," she said. "For a woman you didn't know, in a restaurant where you had other business. So you know how to stop when something matters enough. The question is whether this matters enough." He looked at her for a long time. She let the silence be what it was, not uncomfortable, not pressured, just open, the genuine open space of a woman who had decided the answer would be whatever it was, and she would handle either outcome. "It matters enough," he said quietly. "It matters more than anything I've walked into in a very long time." "Then go to Seoul," she said. "Finish what you need to finish. Come back when you can come back. And you'll be here." "I'll be here," she said. "I have 20 floors to build. I'm not going anywhere." He reached out and touched her face, just his hand against her jaw, briefly, with a particular gentleness of someone who does not often allow themselves to be gentle, and said, "I'll come back." She believed him. All the way down, without reservation, without the specific private asterisk she had learned to attach to every promise Kwame had ever made. She just believed him. This felt like its own kind of arrival. He flew to Seoul on a Tuesday. Kwame came on a Friday. She was alone in her site office when her assistant knocked and said, with careful neutrality, "There's someone here. He says he knows you. Kwame Osei." Erwa set her pencil down. She looked at the blueprints in front of her. The East Wing, the load-bearing calculations, her handwriting in the margins, and she breathed, in and out, and stood up. "Send him in," she said. "And then take your lunch break." He walked in looking like a man who had prepared for a conversation and was already slightly thrown by the terrain. The site office was hers, her plans on every surface, her name on the project board, her hard hat on the hook by the door, and she watched him take it in, watched the small recalibration, and felt nothing particular. Not anger, not grief, not the old pull she had spent a year trying to understand, and another 6 months trying to outlast. Just recognition, like seeing a building you used to live in, and noting it without longing. "Erwa," he said. "Kwame," she said. He looked around the office. He looked at her. He had the expression of a man who had expected something, and was not finding it. "You look well," he said. "I am well," she said. "What do you want?" He shifted. "Can we?" "There's no sit-down version of this conversation," she said. "What do you want, Kwame?" He looked at her for a moment, and she could see him recalculating, the speech he had prepared landing wrong in the actual room, against the actual Erwa, who was not performing grief, and not performing indifference, and not performing anything, who was just standing in her site office waiting for him to say something worth responding to. "The contract," he said finally. "That has nothing to do with me." "He used you to get close," Kwame said. "Seo-jin. Whatever you think is happening between you and him, he came to Lagos for the contract. He met you because you were convenient." She looked at him for a very long moment. "Kwame," she said slowly, "you seated me at the worst table in a restaurant so I would be present and humiliated while you proposed to another woman. You hired someone to follow me and document my movements. You called in a favor with a restaurant host to make sure I felt small the moment I walked in." She tilted her head slightly. "And your argument is that Seo-jin is the one who used me." His jaw tightened. "That's not." "He told me about the contract before it happened," she said. "He sat in my apartment and told me everything and asked me what I wanted him to do about it. He asked me." She let that sit for a moment. "When have you ever asked me what I wanted?" The silence in the site office had a particular quality. Outside, the construction sounds continued, metal on metal, voices, the low groan of machinery, and the city went on being itself, indifferent and enormous, and Kwame stood in the middle of her workspace looking at a woman he had systematically underestimated and was only now, at this distance, beginning to understand. "Nenji knows," he said. His voice was different now, not the prepared version, not the argument he had walked in with. Something underneath it, something genuine and small. "She found out about the restaurant. What I arranged. It's been difficult." Erwa looked at him. She felt something she had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not the clean vindication of a woman whose enemy has fallen. Something more complicated. Something almost like sadness, not for him, but for the version of him she had believed in for 3 years, the version that had maybe once been real before he learned to use people as instruments of his own comfort. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. And she meant it, the way you mean something that costs you nothing because you have genuinely moved past the place where it would have cost you everything. He looked at her. He looked around the office again. He looked at the project board with her name on it, at the 20-floor residential build that was going to change her career, at the hard hat on the hook and the pencil she had set down when he arrived. "You're happy," he said. Not an accusation. Just a fact he was arriving at. "I'm building something," she said. "That's enough for now." He left. She did not watch him go. She sat back down at her desk, picked up her pencil, and found her place in the East Wing calculations. Her phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Seo-jin from Seoul, as if he had a frequency tuned to her life. "How are you?" She looked at the message. She looked at her blueprints. She thought about a man who counted things to understand them, who had asked her what she wanted before he acted, who had sat across from her in a restaurant where she was supposed to break and had instead cleared space around her, literally, physically cleared the room, and asked for something true. She typed back. Kwame came to the site office. 3 dots. Then, "Are you okay?" "Yes," she typed. Asterisk, "It was fine." He looked at my name on the project board, and I think that was the whole conversation. Asterisk. A pause. Then, "I'm glad." And then, after another pause, something that made her sit still in her office chair with a Lagos afternoon pressing warm against the window. Asterisk, "I've booked the return flight. 3 weeks. If you still want..." Asterisk. She read it twice. She set the phone face down on the desk and sat for a moment with the feeling, not giddiness, not the performed excitement of a woman who has been waiting to be chosen. Something quieter. The specific satisfaction of a thing falling into place that was always going to fall into place, that you had the patience to wait for, because you were busy building something in the meantime. She picked the phone back up. 3 weeks, she typed. "I'll cook again." His response came immediately. "I'm counting the days." She put the phone in her pocket. She picked up her pencil. She looked at 20 floors of her own making, and she got back to work. She was fine. She was, for the first time in a long time, completely and specifically and architecturally fine. The way a building is fine when its load-bearing walls are exactly where they need to be, when the structure can hold the weight of everything intended for it. Outside, Lagos continued its argument with itself. The construction noise rose and fell. The city pushed toward evening. Somewhere across a body of water and a continent, a man was counting days. Erwa pressed her pencil to the blueprint and kept building. If you made it here, if you sat with Erwa from the corner table to this office, from the service door to the project board, then you already know this story was never about Kwame. It was about what happens when a woman refuses to perform her pain for an audience, and the specific kind of person that refusal attracts. Subscribe right now because this universe is not finished. There is more of Erwa and Seo-jin coming, and you cannot afford to miss what happens when he walks back through that door in 3 weeks. Like this video if Erwa building her 20 floors while Kwame's contract collapsed is the most satisfying thing you have seen all week. And drop a comment telling me the moment you knew Kwame had already lost, because I want to know exactly when you felt it. We will see you in the next one.